Hey guys, guess what just showed up today? This is the drawing, the blueprint for the afterburner build. Once we get this up, we'll actually be able to start building this car. Now, in regards to this drawing, I'm going to go over this really quickly and just kind of explain where things are and what things are. That circle there, that's the front wheel. And this larger circle, that's the back wheel. I'm kidding. So what we have here is a very sleek, very low, kind of an open concept roadster. You see them on the road, the three-wheelers. Well, this is going to be a four-wheeler open concept. It'll have a windscreen. The roof may or may not have a solid panel. We'll see. And we're going to have the rad at the back to give the front a nice low profile. And of course, the cooling will run from front to back. The red outline is the chassis, which is what we have here in gray primer. In this area through here, there's going to be a side vent. So any air that does come in from the bottom under where the grill would be would just escape here, kind of cooling the engine, giving it some air to breathe. Now, I mentioned in the previous video, it's going to have kind of a GT40 influence. And at this part in the vehicle is going to be the extreme widest point. From this point, this is going to taper inward, and there'll be kind of a scoop between the outer quarter panel and the side panel, and that's going to funnel air into your rad area. And again, going from that point towards the front, it's going to taper in. Now, when it comes to the front hood area, we're going to have a clamshell design where the front section opens up, giving you full access to, well, in this case, the engine. So you can do whatever maintenance or whatever you have to do in front without any panels or whatever impeding it. When we built the SRF32 Roadster, we had the side panels as being solid, and it was kind of a pain to get in and work down deeper in the engine area. So we're going to take and just open everything up, make it easier, because it is pretty tight in there, especially with the side panels. Again, I mentioned it's not going to have any doors, so you basically just jump in and enjoy your ride. Today we're going to start off by building a bird cage on this chassis. But before we can go ahead and start fabricating and cutting and doing all that stuff, we need to determine where things are going to go. Down here we have two rails that get bolted to the chassis. So once we get those in place, then we have to take and transpose the firewall location, brake booster, master cylinder, steering column, seat locations, as well as two structural pillars that sit in those two areas on either side onto the chassis. That's what's going to support basically the cab structure. And all the panels get attached to that. Before we do the panels, we have to, of course, build a wireframe buck. You've seen that before. So once the bird cage is kind of roughed in and established and fabricated, then we'll go ahead and build a wireframe buck around that in such a way that we can remove the wireframe buck off that bird cage and replace it with the actual body panels. Without a wireframe buck, it's like waving a stick in a pail of water. Things just don't happen. I did a motorcycle fender a little while ago. You can see what kind of goes into building a simple wireframe buck. This is going to be a little more elaborate. There'll be a card up here, and you guys can check out that video when you get a moment. We're going to need the straight edge in a minute. In our first episode, you saw us mock up the chassis with the engine and the rear axle. Well, since then, we've developed these two side frame rails, so we can actually start the main structure for the body, the bird cage. If you guys are familiar with C3 Corvettes, they had a metal structure within the fiberglass that supported all the body panels. Well, we're going to do something similar in the sense that we're going to establish the A-post pillar that supports the windshield. Eventually, we get to a B-post pillar once some of the wire frame has been installed for the wireframe buck. And then we have to install C-pillars back here that are going to support the roof structure. So looking at the diagram, there's a post that sits right in here that supports this part of the pillar. There's going to be a pillar in here, in this area, where there's going to be a cross member for seat belts to attach to. And then we're going to have, where the roof comes down, we'll have another set of pillars back in here that tie down to the frame rail and support the roof. This is a wireframe buck diagram. All this is for is establishing the body lines. On these diagrams, which you can probably barely read, I've got all the detailed dimensions for the A-post pillars and C-post pillars. So we're going to start with the fabrication of those areas. locate the firewall, and then move back and get those two box tubing members installed. So we got these frame rails, holes drilled, bolted down to the chassis. Got one at the front, got one here at the back, and we have one at the very back. So we're going to get set up with these vice grips here and these right angle squares with a ruler on the sides. We want to be accurate. Stay. To support the windshield, you need a lot of strength in this particular area. You don't want that windshield chattering as you're going down the road. I think that's about right. No. Move it ahead a little bit there. So this is what we're going to use as a basis for the front firewall right here. This has all been designed, planned out way ahead of time. I'm not designing on the fly. You can do that if you want. It's a lot of fun. But as the project develops, you might run into something you didn't think of earlier. So it's always good to kind of plan things out before we move ahead too far. So based on our drawing, we need a height for the front hood area, the skin of the hood, to be at 24 inches. That's the way it worked out. And this point here is the height of our structural box tubing member that the windshield post is going to tie into. So what we have here, 24 inches, we have the skin, and then down in this area, we have that pillar that's going to support that post. 21 inches. I want to extend down past this. We're going to have a kind of a scoop on the side. I can use this as a pointer. There's kind of a scoop here through this area. Don't know if you guys can see through the engine, probably not. We'll get a drawing up on the screen. There's a scoop, probably fake, I'm not sure yet. It starts just in front of the door and comes back to just in front of the wheel. So we need to get a piece of box tubing that extends down 21 inches. And we'll cut up 2 of them and get them tacked to the frame rails, 1 on each side. Now when it comes to placing or locating this box tubing, this particular piece has a seam on the back side or on this side. And I always like to turn that seam inward so you don't see it. It doesn't affect the strength at all. It's just a cosmetic thing. So we're gonna get this clamped even with the top of that and even with, let's see, there we go. And we can clamp to this box tubing, I hope. I might need to pull its C-clamps. Oh, no, there we go. That's it. So that's going to come in right there. And we should get that plumbed up too. Now, I'm going to put a few tacks on these pieces just to hold them in place for us. I'm not going to fully weld it just yet. There might be something that comes up along the way and we need to reconfigure it, the top surface to blend in with another piece. I can cut those tacks and then put it right back. So there we go. Now, in terms of plumbing these pieces up, I'm not going to plumb them up with respect to the floor. I have to plumb them up with respect to the frame rail themselves. We don't want the car to be leaning one way and the post leaning another way. They have to be perpendicular to the frame rails. And that looks really good right there. Okay, so with these pieces mounted, we can remove these clamps. I'll leave those squares there for now. And now we have to locate the two back ones. Now, in this episode, it might not look like we're doing much except cutting a bunch of box tubing, but that's what we're doing. We're cutting a bunch of box tubing and using them, creating these structural members for the body to be created later on. Now, this is where the diagram on the wall comes in really handy because we have a rear frame rail, the top piece there, and we know where the back of the window line is going to end. And there has to be a support right in through here that doesn't interfere with the radiator. So I can overlay the box tubing member, line it up with that corner. We're not going to come up all the way because we have the quarters to contend with, and we don't want these coming up through the skin. So these are going to sit down lower inside. The roof will tie down into them. And I can get the angle right there, just like that. Don't need to use protractors or compasses or anything like that. Get the angle, it's done. So just plumb these pieces up with the ones in the front. Turn this off. And we're at a stage now where we can start developing the wireframe buck. We don't have the A-pillars completed up to the top yet. We need to work our way up, be able to support the windshields that we have for the car in place. I can't just place them on top of that because you just don't do it that way. You need to work your way up from the bottom, start getting the rods established so that we can then later on work these areas in. So next time, next episode, we're going to begin the wireframe buck. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this short little episode. This is the base work for the next stage. This is really important. So I hope you paid attention because there'll be a test at the end of this build. Take care.